You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Well, thank you so much. I just started getting into your stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to this guy desperately. One, so I could figure out a little bit more about how I could make the system work for me, and two, because I'm wearing my Austin Agile City Limits shirt, and I've been a part of Scrum teams in the past, and I've been a part of Agile teams in the past, and for my personal task manager as well as a bunch of teams that I'm on, I use Trello, which is a Kanban type board. I've used Jira in the past, which is also a Kanban type board, and for people listening who don't know what Kanban is, it's billboard, right? In Japanese?
Signal card, yeah.
Or signal card. All right.
Yeah.
So it's just, maybe, Jim, you can give a little bit of a background to what Kanban means and kind of where it came from. But the reason I'm mainly so excited is because I've never seen it done exactly the way that you've described it. And I started experimenting with it based off a tweet from, I got to get this guy's name. I said I'd give him a shout out. I think Chase Adams, not Scott Adams. That's
not Scott Adams. No,
that's the Dilbert guy. So Chase was reading your book, and he's like, "Oh man, this is a good one, Zach. I think you might like it." So I went to your website, personalkanban.com, and watched I think you have like a 6 or 7 minute video that describes it. I was like, you know what? That seems like a fun experiment. I will try that out. And so I pulled the stuff that I wanted to do that week out, and I created a bunch of sticky notes, and I stuck them on a whiteboard, and I started just from doing to doing, done. And if I was waiting on something, I didn't call it the pin like you did. I just called it waiting for.
Yep.
And I started experiencing something that you describe in your book, which I later started reading after a 2 or 3 week experiment with what I learned from your 7 minute video. So it really is that simple. There's not much actually I'm changing after reading your book, but just a lot more inspired and have a lot more nuance to what personal Kanban is. And it's gosh, the feeling of moving, the physicality of pulling projects in versus just having things pushed at you. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Kanban, what the heck is that? And how does it work?
Well, so personal Kanban, very simply stated, is you take the things that you have to do. You write them down onto Post-it notes, or if you must use something online, you write it down into your online Kanban tool. Then you can see what you actually have to do. So people's main problem is that we have so many expectations of us, and we're juggling all those in our heads. And then we're trying to figure out what to do next. And so prioritization becomes just an incredibly onerous thing. But strangely enough, if you can actually see your work, prioritization becomes a lot easier. Maybe not completely easy, but a lot easier. And then you move tickets through the board, usually options, doing, done. So stuff you haven't done, stuff you're working on, stuff that's complete. And there's only 2 rules to personal Kanban, which is to visualize the work. So get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper, because we can better manage what we can see. And to limit your work in process, because we can't do more work than we can handle.
And you have a very interesting background, and I like it. What's sparked me wanting to ask about it is instead of to do, you name that options, right? It's a little softer. I think it maybe comes from your psychology background. You also have a background in urban design, which I think we'll mention later when it comes to needing slack and you have
Yep.
a great analogy in your book about that. Then software, and then writing and consulting. I happened to catch you before a 6-week bender of consulting gigs. So thank you so much for making the time.
Bet.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how it led you to developing the personal Kanban system?
Well, sure. So there's, I guess, two major things to personal Kanban. One is that it works for us on an individual level. And then the second is that it works for us in a group level. So we have how we relate to ourselves, and then how we relate to others, and others relate to us. And my background of all backgrounds was in psychology. So even from high school, I wrote my high school thesis on downtown redevelopment. I lived in a small city where we decided to build a mall, and the mall ended up completely ghost towning our downtown. And I thought that was awful. But the reason I thought I was awful was because it destroyed kind of the soul of the community. It was like where everybody used to go to do stuff. And then now everybody just went, to go to Orange Julius or something. So from a very early age, I've been interested in kind of what makes us tick as individuals and what makes us tick as a society. So the Kanban itself is set up so that we ourselves can relate better to our work, but also so that we can let other people know what's going on. Why are we doing that work? And so psychology, urban planning, software design, all of the stuff that I've always done has been in one way or another to build communities through building stronger people.
So when the book Personal Kanban doesn't just mean for the individual. It's
right.
It could be for teams.
Exactly. So the word personal, and if I had to go back in time, I would go back in time and I'd change the name. But the word personal was meant objects of value to people, as opposed to industrial Kanban, which was saying like objects of value to the company, which was a little bit different. So when we do knowledge work, a lot of the things that we're doing are things that are coming directly out of our head. We are the object of production. And so if we're upset someday, or we're feeling down, or work is just like piling on top of us, our ability to complete things as people, whether we're individuals or as a team, that is what is diminished. And so we would like to be able to manage that better.
Okay. What if somebody's right now feeling that? They're a little bit weighed down with all the would, could, should, ought tos out in the world. They're having a hard time prioritizing. Or maybe they have a lot of outstanding obligations, or they're just excited about a lot of stuff. That's the problem that I continually run into. Is like, oh, well, I want to be a black belt, and then I also want to write a book, and then I'm going to go sky. It's like, come on, Zach. Let's be reasonable here.
Exactly.
So if whatever problem they're having, it's honestly, it's probably comes to a throughput problem. They've got a ton of stuff in their options column, and not much is getting done in their done column. And maybe their progress, their work in progress, their doing column is chalked up full of stuff.
Right.
So if somebody was just getting started and they were going to say like, I don't know, sticky notes, a whiteboard, sure, I'm going to give it a shot. How would you direct them to get started on that?
So the first thing that I recommend is that you be brutally honest. So don't start off with 3 things in your doing column if you're really working on 12 things. Put all 12 things in the column and then clear them out, and then see what the difference is between how you feel after getting those other, those other blocking 9 things out of the way, and then you can actually move into a flow state. See how that feels. You mentioned options. One of the things is like right now, because of the internet and because of print on demand services, and because there's so many people out there who will lighten our load or give us services that will do things that we couldn't do before, the options that we have now are limitless. We can do whatever it is that we feel like. The problem is we can now do whatever it is that we feel like. There's no limiter. So then we just start doing all of this different stuff. So when I was growing up, my dad was a land developer. We had a bunch of townhomes that he was building. This is in the early 80s. So in the morning, he'd wake up, he'd go walk around the construction site, he'd come back in, he'd make some phone calls, he'd dictate a letter, and then he'd go fishing because there was no internet. So he was done. And so my dad could actually be done with the day. We can't be done with our day anymore. We actually have to make policies to allow ourselves the luxury of feeling like we've completed our stuff. And that is a horrible curse. And it's hurting a lot of us every day. The same thing happens at companies. Companies will launch 55 initiatives at the same time because they can. None of them get done and people get fired and stuff, but because they can, or because they feel like the market needs to, they launch way too much stuff. That's why we say limit your work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Doing kind of a mixture of doing less but better is the book that has become popular recently, Essentialism by Greg McKeown, who I interviewed on a former podcast. And it just resonates with so many people, I think, because of exactly that. There's so many options that you can really tackle a lot.
Exactly. Yes.
Rolling back, we pause for a quick audio check. The big thing if you're going to get started is to be honest. You've got a lot of work that you're working on, and WIP, work in progress, is the acronym that if you have 3 columns, your options, all the things that you could potentially do, you're doing, and then you're done. The doing column should be limited, and a big reason for that is the need to have slack in the work that we do. Can you talk about the story that you had in the book about your urban design background and the need for a little bit of extra slack in the system?
So you're talking about the traffic analogy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So most of my background was either in the application of technology to transportation or just transportation systems at all. So I one of the things that will send me to purgatory for a very long time is the number of freeways that I designed. I'm a bad man for that, but when we designed a freeway, we would design a freeway to operate at about 45% capacity.
Okay.
And so what happens is, if you have a freeway and it's like 10, 20, 30, 40% capacity, it's really flowing along pretty well. When it gets to about 42, 43, 44%, you start to notice some intermittent breakdowns. When it gets to about 60%, you're guaranteed to find slowdowns. And then anything above that, the facility just stops working. And our brains are very similar. We actually need a lot of open space for things to maneuver. And it's not just because we need to think, it's because the more things we start, the more people will interrupt us. Every task we take on is a relationship. It's a set of interactions. So when we start something, we're opening up all sorts of avenues for people to send us emails and phone calls and stuff saying, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? So what we want to do is limit our work in progress and not start a whole lot of projects so that we limit those interactions and we're able to allow work and thoughts to flow.
Okay. So we're back at square one. We've got, let's say, 9 things in our work in progress. What next? We've gotten real.
Okay. So if you're starting now, we have 9 things in our work in progress. What I would do first is I would say, okay, so today is the first day of the rest of my career. And I would look at those 9 things and I would say, okay, what are the first of those 9 things that I can get to go away as quickly as possible? And I would say for 3 hours, I'm just going to knock out those things. And I'm reasonably sure that you could probably knock off at least 3 of those 9. Okay, then we have 6 kind of big rocks, and you probably got those big rocks in there because of some politics. So the first question is, what of these things am I really working on? What of these things should go like into, as you mentioned, into a waiting column because we're actually waiting on somebody else to do things? And what of these things are actually necessary? And if we find that we've got maybe of those things, we have now 7 things that are actually,
we're at 6.
If we have 6 things that are, okay, so if we have like 5 of those things that are absolutely necessary, then we just look at like, okay, what are the next 2 that maybe I can grab somebody, pull them into a conference room, we can think about this really hard for a few hours and we can make it go away. And then what we start to do when we're doing that is we're learning different mechanisms to get our work done as quickly as possible, as opposed to starting our work as quickly as possible. So go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna it kind of reminded me of the Dave Ramsey snowball effect. It's just like get a little bit of momentum, pay off those smaller debts, pay off those smaller projects
Exactly.
that you want to get done, clear a little bit more of your bandwidth, so you're not going back and forth on something. And then you said some of the big projects are sometimes politics. A lot of the people that listen to this show are self-employed or small business owners. So maybe the things that they put on their plate aren't necessarily because a committee or a boss told them to do it. It's because they chose to put it on their on their plate. And whittling those down, what are some good strategies for that? Or can you just drop some things if necessary?
Yeah, so there's two things. One, if you're working alone, you can do this with impunity, is use something that you've probably talked about at some point, which is the Pomodoro technique, which is basically saying, okay, for 25 minutes, I'm just going to focus on this one ticket, right? This particular ticket says Sears fraud idiots, because every time I leave, the credit card that I have that's owned by the Sears people, they routinely flag it for fraud because I've left Seattle. So apparently, you're like never supposed to leave town. Totally an annoying card that I don't want to deal with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside 25 minutes. I'm going to Pomodoro that. And I'm just going to focus on it. I'm going to make it go away. You can get an amazing amount of work done if you just, you shut off the phone, you shut off everything else, and you just focus for 25 minutes. The other thing is there's work in progress, but there's also projects in process. So what we're trying to avoid is when you start something and you don't finish it, you don't stop thinking about it. It weighs you down. It's something that's called the Zeigarnik effect. And so when we start tasks, there's a certain amount of our brain's capacity that's just focused on that thing that we've started. So that can be projects or it can be tasks. So the fewer projects that we have in process, the faster we'll get projects done. So for an individual practitioner, there's understanding that we can only do like so many things at a time, both in tasks and projects, and that other people are going to interrupt you with things you never wanted to do to begin with. So we have to have kind of like a ghost project of just craft that sits out there, right? And so the big hard thing for individual practitioners or for solopreneurs is just saying, I'm only going to work on this ad campaign and then I'm going to get it out. Or I'm going to work on this, business development thing and then I'm going to get it out. And just focus on it and finish it before you start a new thing. And if you have multiple projects in process, way back there on the wall, we can see that just like for total transparency, I currently have 15 projects in process.
You're a bad man.
I'm a bad man, but I'm a bad man that has 6 clients and does business development. And I write books and I have video classes. So there's a lot of things that as solopreneurs or as small businesses that we juggle that we just can't hide from. You still have to do accounting no matter what. So what I have on that wall back there is the project level of everything that's in flight, so that when that client calls, I can look back there and know what's going on. Or when that prospect calls, I can look back there and I can know what's going on. And that I don't live in some ideal world where I think, okay, well, I'll just always only have 3 projects. But what I do is I look back on that whenever I have a great idea, I look at that wall and say, later. That idea comes later.
Yeah, exactly. When you have a dashboard or some sort of system to let you know what you're currently doing, saying no becomes so much easier because you realize, well, if I say yes to this, I'm either adding to this pile or something else has got to give. So it helps. That in itself helps limit the amount of work that you have, which will in the long term increase your slack. You mentioned the Zeigarnik effect?
Zeigarnik effect, yes.
Okay, I've for the last 7 years been calling it the Zeigarnik effect, so that's going to be hard for me to undo. But for the Zeigarnik effect, you mentioned that that this is, and maybe you could tell a little bit of the history of it. It's something where it helps you remember things that are incomplete.
Yes.
Additionally, it also means as soon as something's complete, your brain tends to drop it.
Exactly.
And this is where the done column, I think, is relatively effective, because instead of just doing work and doing work and doing work and then putting your head up at the end of the week or the month or the quarter and be like, well, gosh, I seem to have done a lot, but what actually got done, you have some sort of record of what happened. You have a physical thing. Oh man, that project,
Exactly.
that was great. That one made me feel good. Or, okay, well, did the bookkeeping for the year. That wasn't fun, but I did it. I did the Pomodoro technique, and I just went into my, or I hired somebody for it, and that was amazing. That was the best money I've spent.
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about, well, I guess I kind of let most of the cat out of the bag, apologize, about using the done column for what is in Agile called the retrospective.
Right. So, I mean, as you mentioned, part of the Zeigarnik effect is that when we finish something, we tend to get closure and we move on, especially if that thing's normal. So if it wasn't weird, we'll really forget it. And that's why when we go to do timesheets, we can't remember what we did 2 weeks ago. And so the done column is a written record, but it can also be a real-time analysis tool for the work that you're doing. So we'll build like a 2x2 matrix in the done column, so make it like really wide and put like a big 2x2 matrix in it. And you can put, urgent and important, or you can put effort and payoff, or you can put loved it, okay, didn't like it, hated it, or you could say, totally needed me, totally could have been outsourced. And you can start in real time when you're finishing things, start to actually analyze the work that you're doing. So one of the problems with Agile retrospectives is that they come way too late to actually do any good. They also tend to ask questions that aren't helpful, like what went right, what went wrong, and what would you change? Mm-hmm. Those are leading questions that force people to answer those questions and not actually to think about their work. So we also fall prey to something that psychologists call a rosy retrospection, which is when something that sucks happens. At the time, we're like, this really sucks. And then like a week later, you're like, you should have been there. It was like really hard. And then a week after that, you're like, I totally nailed it. So we tend to remember the past is better than it was. So the bigger the gap between the action and the feedback, the more likely it is that the change that you engage in is going to be less effective. So if we have in our done column an area that says like, the bottom part was, no, this totally sucks. The moment that any ticket goes into that, that's when you have your retrospective just about that ticket. And you're like, wow, just call me crazy, but I didn't wake up this morning to do things that suck. That wasn't my goal. So since this did, how can I make sure that this one ticket doesn't happen again? I mean, and again, I'll come back to this ticket. The way I'm getting rid of this ticket is I'm not going to have that card anymore. I'm just getting rid of it because this happened over and over and over again. Even though I've had that card since 1988, which is like longer than most people that work for me now have been like alive.
Well, after this call, we can get into some credit card travel hacking details. I'm in that world, I can give you some recommendations for sure.
Awesome. But I mean, that's the thing. So both actually on the inbound, on the options side and on the done side, there's a lot of different things we can do to analyze that work in real time so that we get more context about what we're about to start doing and we can learn more immediately about what we just did.
Yeah. Yeah, in the moment, you just
Mhm.
frowny face. That was not fun.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Or
that was
like energy level, or what are some other things that you would add to that? Like just immediately, let's think about this card later. What are
mhm.
some triggers that would potentially do that? Just really bad was sounded like one.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is that so the liked it, whatever, liked it, meh, didn't like it, was awful. That's something that's called subjective well-being,
Mm.
and that is an immediate indicator of of quality. Because as professionals, we tend to feel bad about something that actually we didn't do to our expectations, or it's something that interrupted our work and should go away. So subjective well-being is a huge one. It's the one that we actually recommend the most. Then there's other ones which were, was this a planned task, an unplanned task, an interruption, or a nuisance? Was this for project A, project B, project C, or overhead? Was this part of market? Anything that. So what we want people to do while they're using their personal Kanban is, yes, we want you to track your work and we want you to limit your work in progress, but mostly what we want is to actually understand what we're doing and then do like the best thing that we could be doing at any given point in time, and be doing it in a way that we're happy with, because we spend most of our time working. And if we're not happy with what we're doing, then why are we doing it? Unless somebody has a gun to your head, you probably should be doing something that at least doesn't piss you off, right?
Well, especially if you're self-employed
Yeah.
or own your own business, you have all the choices. You have all the
Mhm.
options. Might as well do things that are in alignment with your strengths and your skills and your
Yep.
personality type and what you want to do. And it sounds like this system is, to use another Japanese word, which we will see if I mispronounce or not, is a natural Kaizen type
Mhm.
continuous improvement system,
Exactly.
because you see the flow all the way through. It's visualized, one, and it's tactile, it's physical. So you're going from the backlog or the options column to the doing, or the in progress column to the either the done, or
Mhm.
you need to wait for somebody to get back to it so you can go back into the work in progress.
Mhm.
And then at the very end, you can, what I've loved over experimenting with this over the last 3 weeks is, at the end of the week, I just look at what's been done, and it brings me back. In addition
Yes.
to looking back at my calendar to see what meetings and appointments that I had
Mhm.
that week, looking at that column is very just satisfying. It's like, okay, cool. These projects made forward progress. I want to get back to the options column a little bit, because I know for me, having not having a physical um, system before like this,
Mhm.
I have a lot of would, could, should, ought tos, obligations, good ideas, someday
Mhm.
maybes,
Yep.
current projects, current clients, possible clients.
Yes.
The list is long. I mean, it's got to be 200-300 potential
Yes.
things in my world. Do I need to buy like the biggest dry erase board in the world, or how do you manage that much stuff? Even
Right.
though I'm not working on a majority of it, I do like to have that option columns there. So if okay, maybe I have an idea for this YouTube channel it's probably 2017, maybe 2018. I want to
Yep.
start a productivity YouTube channel. Sounds great. I find this great resource for how to edit videos for free, or
Yep.
whatever it happens to be. I then save that resource to that YouTube channel potential idea.
Yep.
So that's useful for me. But it feels like a clutter of options might make it then difficult to prioritize either the big projects or the small projects when you have just
Totally.
so much stuff there. Even though it's visual, it's still a
Mhm.
lot. How do you handle that?
Right. So, I mean, as you might guess, so when we are working with clients, we're talking about prioritization and right sizing of tasks and humanistic management and better ways of doing accounting, and better ways of hiring, and just all these different things about work, whether it's individual work, teamwork, or corporate work. And people are like, why haven't you written a book about that yet? And it's like, because there's literally hundreds of books that I could write. I could quit consulting and actually talking to other human beings at all, and just go lock myself in a cave and just write books nonstop for the rest of my life. So there, again, there's way more options than we can handle, and all those things could become online classes and blah 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 blah. So this is where the personal Kanban part, which is very much like, how do I understand the work that I need to do right now? How do I do it? And then how do I get, how do I really interpret what it is that I just did? Meet with the David Allen side, which is the very strategic, back end, or the Lencioni side, which is, what could I do, in the future? Mm-hmm. And so those someday maybe columns. So what we have are two things. One is, I have a Dropbox folder that's just called potential books, and it is literally filled with pre-writing of stuff. So should one day I become an acclaimed writer, that's like the part where people are going to go at the end and say, oh my God, look at all of this undiscovered Jim Benson. But we all have a lot of undiscovered us. So we need a place to put the ideas that we explore for a little bit. And if we don't explore those ideas and we just do like the tasks, then we're kind of becoming machines and we're never investing in the future. So a lot of those half-done things, people are like, well, you really should finish that. I'm like, no, that was my brain working while typing. It's okay. Then we have other boards that say, potential books, potential classes, potential this, potential that. We use a CRM that has a Kanban in it, which is a gorgeous board. And that...
it's not contextually, is it?
Is it what?
Is it contextually?
No, it is...
You've already bought it, so the Zeigarnik effect. Oh, shoot.
That's right.
Organic.
Active Campaign.
Oh, Active Campaign. Okay.
Yeah, and it is... Let me get you back up here, so I'm looking at you. There we go. And it's a gorgeous board, which would be silly if I showed it to you, but it has all of the conversations that are going on right now between us and potential customers. And anybody that's ever done any marketing or any customer support knows that you have more than 3 people that you're dealing with at a time. Mm-hmm. So that board is sorted by, initial conversation, deeper conversation. I can't remember exactly what the columns are, but it's got like 8 columns that people move through before they get to either, became a client or didn't become a client. Different types of work require different visualizations. And what we do...
So with that, the CRM, for example, would there be a card on your overall personal Kanban that says, look at CRM for 25 minutes a day? Or where does that, how do you, if you want the system to be complete, mm-hmm. How do you make it complete even though you've got these other silos?
Right. So what we have is we have a column in the personal Kanban that's called Daily Pomodoros. And CRM is part, BizDev is what that card says. And that's basically the pay attention every day to the CRM. The other one, there's 3 of them. The other one says stats. And that's basically just saying, how did the websites do? How did the books do? How do the things that people visit asynchronously do? And then the third is social media. And so every day I will do a social media Pomodoro where I spend some time on Twitter and I spend some time on Facebook and I spend some time, talking to people. But I guess there's 4 now because one of them is respond to conversations in the online classes. But that's basically 1 or 2 hours of every day that are spent doing what people would call repetitive tasks. Mm-hmm. And what I'll do is I'll just move the ticket. There's like an imaginary line, and we'll just move the tickets down and the tickets up to show that they've been done each day.
Okay.
And there's other things in there that aren't are there other things that should be in there perhaps that aren't, like accounting and bookkeeping and things, but those are the things that we've tried our best to outsource.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we can, we are going to hire somebody that's just going to be watching the stats and handling kind of our I guess what you might call back end marketing, if that makes sense. But that's like the next phase. So we're constantly looking at the board saying, how can we get rid of repetition, which is strange because in basic lean or in agile, you're trying to find the repetition. And to a very real extent, when you own your own business, when you're a solopreneur, you're trying to get rid of the repetition.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of, while I hate to reference Tim Ferriss, but to Tim Ferriss this a bit, you're looking for the thing that you can define, and the moment you can define that, you should try and find someone else to do it. Because as solopreneurs, we make money off of ideas. We don't make money off of production. I mean, unless we're artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where you could do the work the system or the E-Myth type, create some documentation and outsource of it if it's a small repetitive task.
Exactly.
Or if there's a, like, bookkeeper is just the simplest example, because it seems to be the thing that all entrepreneurs hate, and and it's very affordable to outsource. I know for me, it's just painful. And the Pomodoro technique does help me, because I just set the timer, 25 minutes. I'm gonna do it. I gotta amp myself up for it, and then take a walk afterwards. I don't know why, but it just that's what it's. I'm not gonna argue with it. That's what my body does. I pucker up and I do it. So you mentioned repetitive tasks, which was definitely a question that I had for you. Bigger task. A lot of times, maybe you've got something stuck in the work in progress, like write book. And maybe you should break that up into a little bit of detail. How does the breaking up of bigger projects work, or even the planning? I was talking with a organizational and productivity coach, Kathy Vines, a Clever Girl organization, right before this call, and she made that point too. It's like, well, okay, this seems like a great workflow for getting stuff done. But the original planning, it seems like there's maybe a missing piece there that you might need to address ahead of time. But I wanted to put that question to you. How do you handle those bigger projects?
Is this a video podcast or is this an audio podcast?
I'm currently, since we're on Zoom, recording the video as well, because I've never done it on Zoom.
All right. So in that case, then let me share my screen really quick.
Oh, this will be fun. This will make the YouTube a lot better. Normally, we just scrape the audio and put it on YouTube.
Okay. So share screen. And
so we'll put this in the show notes, folks who are just listening.
Okay. So, dang it.
I knew you were a Trello user.
I hate it when they put, there it goes, go away. they put all these dialog boxes right on top of hide notification. Thank you. All right, so very quickly, this
and
is...
a Dashlane user. Interesting, okay.
You're very quickly, you are totally a security risk, man. So this is our what do you call it? Our task board. So this is things that we're doing on a daily basis. So these are the things that we're working on.
And he's showing, for people listening, there's a Trello board with a bunch of lists and cards on those lists. So it's a digital task board. And it looks like at the very top of those lists, it counts the number of cards. How did you get it to do that?
That's a plugin. So this is one of the big problems with Trello, is that Trello doesn't limit your work in progress. So this is called Card Counter, and you just add it. It's just an add-in in Chrome for Trello, and it counts the number. So you can see, we're trying to stick to 3. At the moment, I'm doing a really good job because I'm not doing anything apparently. But here's our Pomodoro stuff that I just told you about. These are things that are on hold, and actually I did that one, so I can move that over to done. But there's a couple of things in here that I should point out. So one is that this is our today column. So these are the things that Tony Ann and I want to get done. And I want to get done today. These are the things that Tony Ann is working on right now. And as I said, my thing right now should just say, have this interview. But the bigger thing for us is that a couple of weeks ago, I started tracking what I was doing to learn every day. And Tony Ann then turned around and turned part of that into a column, which is basically like what we're reading and what we're working on right now. So we're making sure that our company, that Modus Cooperandi, is constantly learning, and that I know what she's reading and she's knowing what I'm reading, so that when we do get together and talk, we can talk about those things. Nice. But your question was this. So these are the videos that are going into our courses, right? And so right here, we have our workflow, which is task-based, and tasks flow very quickly, and tasks flow through doing, just stuff that we're doing. But things can flow through a different type of workflow. So these are every ticket in here is a segment of a video class, right? So here we have things that we will film at some point, stuff that we're in pre-production for, stuff that we're actively filming, and then these are post-production for the 4 different classes that we have, right? Or the 3 different classes, I guess, and the blog. And then, or no, 4, that's right. And then things that are reviewed, things go on the site, final review, and then they're complete. So these things are just objects. So for when we write a book, these objects tend to be either sections of a book or chapters of a book, depending on how coherent the book is when we start, right? So we did a thing like this with a German company that built a system that broke down InDesign documents into paragraphs and then would send out these huge documents to literally thousands of localizers globally. So like when Daimler-Benz is making a new SLK promo document, they will literally have thousands and thousands of people localizing that document in real time. They'll be editing it, they'll be translating it, they'll be changing references to be more culturally appropriate. And they actually work on their asset, as they call it, is at the paragraph level. So if one page has 3 different paragraphs on it, 3 entirely different people could have localized that just for one market. It's crazy. But they have a huge board, and basically what happens is if you're working, you on your task board, you'll get a bunch of possible things that you can pull, and then you'll pull them through your ready, doing, done. But on their board, they have a massive, massive board where they're watching all of these assets move constantly. So there's this project level type board, and then there's this action level board. And both of these are necessary if you are tracking a project of size.
This is actually really helpful.
That was so long.
Seeing this is helpful, and I do have one question. And it just came up last night. I've got a virtual assistant, Debbie, who's awesome, who helps me with the podcast. She does graphic design. She also schedules the social media out for it. And I wanted to have a board exactly like the board that you're showing for the podcast. I actually did create one. It just wasn't super cleaned up. So I cleaned it up, and we've got recorded or reached out or put a backlog of different ideas the show could be on, where we're at with the editing process, if we've created the show notes or not, if she's created the images. So it's got this whole workflow similar to your workflow. But the kind of the issue we had is we've been using a to-do, doing, done column with all of her other work. And so what I ended up doing is creating a new card in the to-do, doing, done work that Debbie and I do together in that board and linked it to that project board. Is that how you handle it, or what's the ideal for managing a project on your overall big picture board?
Right. So you've got the project work, and then how do you make that into tasks? And so what what will happen this afternoon, in fact, because I'm working on a unit this afternoon for this, is that when that happens, I will create a ticket in the board basically saying working on unit blah 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 blah, and I'll just drop that in as a task. And because this board is rather specific, I can say, working on pre-production for unit blah 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 blah, which means I'm doing the slides and the script. And then later I can say working on filming for this or what have you. And then that way Tony, Ann, and John know what I'm doing at any given point in time. The benefit of not linking it to the cards is just that I find that when you have a small team and that small team talks a lot, you don't need that level of integration. Mm-hmm. And that level of integration, after a while, just ends up adding to the complexity of the boards.
Yeah. It seemed like kind of like a fake thing that I was trying to shoehorn it, because I didn't want her checking. She's got we've got a whole checklist of things that she does, and I didn't want her to have to do that twice. But I also know that for her, it's very nice to have one column, and once I'm done with that column, Zach needs to give me more work, or like I get to hang out and more. She's great at graphic design. I'm having her take some graphic design classes, so she'll then go work on the graphic design. Right. But I suppose she could just know, okay, this project is ongoing. Every Wednesday, a new podcast comes out. I just make sure that I'm on it.
So this right here, you see that there's a checklist in this particular card, and I don't particularly like checklists, but this literally the same thing happens to every video, right?
Put it on site.
Put it on site. You write up a description, and so every single one of these does that. So it's silly to make cards for those things that happen every time. It's just basically to make sure did, and then you're complete. So for her, what might happen is there might be a podcast board, and then part of the thing is the stage that it's in, but then another part is, and then I did this finishing work.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. That's super helpful. See, I told you this podcast was going to be partially spreading your ideas, partially scratching my own.
It is nearly impossiple for me to sit down for any conversation and not have it become consulting.
That's I've said that to other people. I had an Evernote expert on recently, and I was like, you could either pay you for consulting or start a podcast and get free.
That's right.
I just did. So I want to respect your time. I definitely have some more questions when it comes to favorite writing utensils and color coding and whatnot. And I listened to another interview where you talked about lean coffee, but maybe we can get into those when you come back for your whirlwind tour in Europe and the United States. You mentioned a video course, and I wanted to talk about that. You very nicely, and it'll be in the show notes for this, gave a 25% off discount for that course, and I took advantage of that. And
I was going to say, it's already been tested.
Because of it worked, and because of how quickly I sent out the invite and you accepted the invite. I haven't gotten done yet, but it's super helpful so far. So
awesome.
I want to let folks know about that. And then two questions I tend to ask every single guest, book and tool. And since we just saw your reading list, great books, by the way.
Thank you.
Is there a book that you might recommend to our listeners, small business owners who want to be more control of their work, that might help them out? And it could be personal. It could be just like Power Now. I saw you reading.
That's right. Yeah, those things. And out of those, there's the Deep Work book.
Oh, Cal's book. Yeah. Love that.
Which is quite good.
I see a lot of parallels of how your system would really help you do more focused, deep, uninterrupted work. And even the Pomodoro technique is a technique to help you manage your attention.
Exactly. But frankly, like the two books that I try to recommend to everyone are Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Okay. Because what I don't want people to do is get so focused on tips and tricks and mind hacks that you forget why you're doing this, which is like to have like a real life, right? Most of us who are solo entrepreneurs actually want to like have a life. And I think that that's just a ridiculously important book for doing that. Actually, I'll just stop there. It's short. It's easy to read. It's not easy to read because
no, it's
not. but what I mean, it's an awesome book both for perspective and to ask some like important, more existential questions, like why we're here and why we do work and things like that. And the only other one, which is much longer and much more difficult to get, actually. Oh crap! What's it called? I'm reading it right now, so I should remember what it's called.
Brain Rolls?
No, it's the biography of Kahneman and Tversky, which is written by the guy who wrote Moneyball. It's sitting downstairs, and I can't remember the name of it right now. I should feel stupid about that. Actually, let me look because it's on this board, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great author.
The Undoing Project.
What's that?
The Undoing Project.
The Undoing Project. Well, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
And the reason that it's important is number one, because it just talks about two people actively working to figure out why we think a certain way, but it's also about two people who had rather exceptional lives because they wanted to. And also about the nature of collaboration, which is I think an important thing for all solopreneurs to take in, because we don't just outsource things; we pick collaborators. So if you think I'm gonna hire a virtual assistant and I'm just gonna feed her work, or I'm going to hire an accountant and feed that person work, then that's probably where you're going to have a bad relationship with your virtual assistant and your accountant. But you're building a relationship for them to come in and help be stewards of something that is probably the most important thing in your life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That was very helpful. The tool, what do you got with the tool? Anything that you appreciate, like Trello, Evernote, sticky notes?
Well, so it should be very apparent that there's Post-it notes on the walls, and I just showed you some digital stuff. So, what do the greatest philosophers of our generation say? They say everything in its right place. So let's listen to Radiohead, and that all of our when we're doing a project, the tool should match what you're trying to get. If you're trying to get immediate feedback just for you, put the Post-it notes on the wall. If you're working with other people and they're not near you, you're going to use something that's more digital. You want the board to tell you something that you don't already know. So when you're building the board, say, what is it that I need to learn about my work, not how can I track it as it flows around. Yeah.
Jim, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can maybe make a part 2 sometime in the future.
That would be awesome.
And thanks again. Good luck with your travels.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Able Business Radio. Zach wants to help more small business owners like you make 1% improvements that add up to big results. Was this show helpful? Pay it forward. Subscribing and writing a review in iTunes is one of the best ways to help more people find out about the show. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope to see you here next Wednesday, where we will continue to share 1% improvements that will help you become a more useful, less stressed business owner.